I've spent all my adult life trying and quite frankly failing to lose weight because I kept making the same mistakes. But I've just managed to lose 20 kilos by changing my approach. So give me a few moments of your time and I'll make sure you don't make the same mistakes. Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Mel and I'm a first-time mum on a massive mission to transform my life in 2026. I've already done a few videos on what my plan for 2026 looks like, so if you're keen to give them a watch, I will link them down below. But today we are going to be talking about the 4 biggest mistakes that I made that kept me from reaching my weight loss goals. And I know some of you are definitely making these same mistakes, so I hope this video is helpful. So I have talked about my weight loss journey from a lot of different angles and perspectives, and I've talked about what I ate and how I exercised, and I've recently done a video on exactly how I lost 20 kilos if you want to give that a watch, because it's quite a good summary of everything I've done so far that has worked for me. But today I want to talk to you about what I had to stop doing in order to get the weight to come off. And I know just from talking to other people and seeing other people's weight loss journeys on YouTube that these mistakes are often kind of framed as the right way to lose weight or even the only way to lose weight, when in fact, more often than not, they actually hinder weight loss. And the whole point of this YouTube channel is to help people who are on similar weight loss and health journeys to me. And I don't want anyone to needlessly make the same mistakes that I did. So let's get into it. Mistake number 1 is aiming for perfection. And look, we've all heard this before. Progress is better than perfection and consistency is the most important thing. Sure, cool. But you know what? It's not always that easy. When you're really overweight and you've been trying to lose weight and trying to get your health back on track and your efforts have spanned years and you still don't feel any closer to your goal, you might start to panic and you might start to get really angry and frustrated with yourself. And you might tell yourself that you're not trying hard enough and that you have to work harder and take it more seriously. And I found myself in this position so many times. And the further away my weight loss goals seemed to be and the more control that I felt like I was losing, I was more desperate to claw it back and be stricter and implement more rules. I told myself that if I was really serious and I really wanted it, I had to do things perfectly. And if I didn't, I was lazy and I was uncommitted and I couldn't possibly want weight loss as a goal. And that's just not true. Perfection might be disguised as a way to help you lose weight quickly, but it almost never works because we're human beings. And if you're aiming for the perfect diet and the perfect exercise routine and to take all your supplements and drink enough water and meditate and get enough sleep, and you're aiming to do all of those things perfectly every single day, something will give because it is not sustainable. And in my case, I made all these really intense meal plans for myself and exercise routines, and I just went like harder and stricter and more perfect because I was getting more desperate to get the results that I wanted. So I thought I was getting closer to getting what I wanted, but I was actually moving further away because none of the changes I were making were sustainable. So I ended up failing and just gaining weight in a vicious cycle. And finally, when I decided to do things a little bit differently and cut myself some slack, that's when I started losing weight. I was still very focused on nutrition and exercise for most of the week, but the difference was I allowed myself some grace and some freedom. And I ended up losing 10 kilos in a pretty short period of time. Some weeks I ate more treats than I probably should have, and I didn't lose as much weight on those weeks. But instead of getting angry at myself and feeling frustrated and thinking I had ruined everything and had to start again the next Monday, I just kept chugging along. And when you're consistent and you do things really well most of the time, you will see results. You might not drop 10 kilos in 5 weeks, but you will lose weight and you've got a better chance of keeping your sanity. I also want to add before we move on to the next point that aiming for perfection is the last thing you want to do if you're also trying to improve your relationship with food, because those two things do not mix well. So please, as much as I hate to sound like a cliche, if you want to lose weight, aim for consistency instead of perfection. As tempting as it may be, don't do it. Because I promise you, consistency works better than perfection for sustainable weight loss. And this gal who is down 20 kilos is proof of that. Okay, mistake number 2 is going from 0 to 100. So much like the first point, when we feel out of control, it's natural to want to push harder and be stricter and do more. And I made this mistake so many times, maybe even more than the aiming for perfection mistake. I was constantly going from 0 to 100. I was really overweight. I have now lost 20 kilos, but I still have another 20 kilos to lose. So at the start of my YouTube health weight loss journey, I had 40 kilos to lose. And unsurprisingly, I wasn't very fit. I was barely exercising. Yet I decided it would be a good idea to make myself an exercise plan that involved an hour of brisk walking 5 to 6 times a week, because I was really fat. I had a lot of weight to lose, so I should have been exercising more than anyone. And what do you know? I could not keep that up. My body was just not used to that much exercise. I'd pushed it from doing almost nothing some weeks to 5 or 6 hours of exercise a week. And as a result, I developed all these little niggles, like in my ankle or my knee or whatever it might be. And I chose to ignore those niggles and not rest, because resting was not part of my intense exercise schedule. Thank you very much. So I pushed through, the niggles turned to injuries. And then when I was injured, I actually couldn't keep exercising. So I felt sad and angry and frustrated and defeated, and I felt all the feelings. And then I chose to eat those feelings. And through that process, I gained more weight. And I repeated that whole cycle again and again, many more times than I care to admit. And it wasn't always an injury that took me down. Sometimes it was just exhaustion, because my body wasn't used to such a sudden and significant increase in physical activity. And to be clear, this mistake doesn't just apply to exercise. It can also apply to, well, I guess any component of a weight loss journey, but nutrition, for example. If you're trying to make changes to your diet, perhaps pick 1 or 2 things and focus on them and slowly build from there, rather than trying to change your entire diet overnight and expecting it to stick. So if you want to lose weight, even if you're really overweight and you've got a lot of work to do not go from 0 to 100, because it will not get you there faster. In fact, it will very likely set you back. As frustrating as it can feel, my advice is to meet yourself where you are, even if you're not particularly thrilled with where that is at the moment. And from there, aim for gradual and sustainable change. Okay, mistake number 3, not planning ahead. If you're trying to make changes to your life, you have to do things differently, right? But if you're trying to do things differently, it's not just going to happen. Unless you're prepared and ready to go, you will very quickly fall into old comfortable habits. I often made the mistake of telling myself on the weekend that next week I would eat well-balanced, nutritious meals. But then I wouldn't do anything about it. Maybe I might go grocery shopping, but then I'd come home and put all that food in the fridge and it just sat there. So come Monday, off I went to work with no healthy packed lunch. So I would end up buying lunch. And then when I got home after a long day and there was no dinner even slightly ready to go or half prepared, it was just easier to cook pasta or have toast or get takeaway. And it's a really hard habit to break, because it involves doing something hard now so that future you benefits. And you have to do that again and again and again. Now, I'm not suggesting that you always have to choose productivity and planning over relaxing. Absolutely not. I'm a big relaxing fan, and it is actually also very good for your health. But what I am saying is that sometimes you will have to make that choice. So what does planning ahead actually look like? Maybe it's planning out the meals that you're going to have for the week ahead and then shopping for those meals, or doing as much prep in advance as you can, like making salad dressings or sauces in advance, or chopping some veggies for the next night's dinner, or marinating some meat ahead of time. Could also be making sure all your washing's done so you've actually got clean gym clothes to wear for the week. Maybe it's talking to your partner about what your schedules look like for the following week so that you can both figure out how to fit in your exercise around kids and work and life. Planning ahead will look different for everyone, and it might take some trial and error to figure out what works for you and your family and your lifestyle. But basically, you have to set yourself up for success ahead of time, because when things are hard or different or challenging, our brains tell us to go back to what is safe and familiar. And we don't want that. We don't want safe and familiar right now, because that's how we got to where we are in the first place. So try and make things as smooth and frictionless as possible. So you don't even give yourself the choice half the time. It's just there. It's just done. Decision is made. And look, having control over things is hard, especially when you're a parent. But if there are areas that you can control, do it. Okay, mistake number 4, the final mistake that we're going to talk about today, is being discouraged when things don't work instantly. So in our brains, in our smart little brains, we know that weight loss and getting fit and improving our health doesn't happen overnight. It takes time and consistency and commitment. We get that. We know that. We understand that. But some part of us still kind of expects instant results, or at least very quick results. Because when we're trying really, really hard to cut out bad habits, and we're eating well and we're exercising and we're doing all the right things, at least at the start, each day can feel like a week. So when you've been doing it for a week, you think, right, well, there's no point in trying on these pants that are really, really tight because I've only been doing this for a week and there's no way there's going to be a difference after a week. But you try them on anyway. And when they don't feel massively looser, you're disappointed, even though logical you knows that nothing crazy would have happened in a week. You're still kind of disheartened. And I know I'm not the only one that feels like that. My logical brain knows how it all works. But part of me, well, not so much anymore, but part of me used to feel really deflated when I didn't see quicker results. And being disappointed because I wasn't seeing results faster and then deciding to give up was a mistake that I made many, many times. All of my weight loss success so far, and by weight loss success, I mean weight that I have managed to keep off, not weight that I lost when I was intensely restricting or something and then gained it all back again. The 20 kilos that I lost and have managed to keep off came about as a result of slow and sustainable approaches to losing weight. And some weeks I didn't notice or feel anything at all. It felt like nothing was happening and I was staying exactly the same. And then the next week, randomly, I would suddenly see this change. Like my clothes were looser and the scales were moving and my face looked different. It just seemingly came out of nowhere. So I've learnt to be patient. I know that if I put in the work, the results will follow. And I have proven that to myself time and time again. So now when I have my off days, I remind myself to stick with it. Because even if I feel like my efforts aren't getting me anywhere, I know that's not true. And I also know that giving up and eating a whole block of chocolate, which I have done so many times, that's definitely not getting me any closer to the results I want. And a little tip I have for you guys, if you ever feel the same way, is to imagine what your life could look like in 6 months or even 3 months from now if you stuck with it and didn't give up. How would you look? How would you feel? Those clothes hanging in your cupboard that haven't fit you in 2 years, maybe they start doing up again because you didn't give up. I want you to dream about it and I want you to hone in on it and I want you to obsess about what your life could look like if you had your own back and trusted yourself and trusted the process and really just gave it your all. Ooh, I'm getting excited. However, I will add a little caveat here. If you have been working on your health or your weight loss for a considerable time and you're not seeing results, there is nothing wrong with digging a little deeper and doing some exploring. I had an experience where I was exercising and eating really well and the weight just stopped moving. I could not get rid of it. And it ended up being a thyroid issue. And when the thyroid issue was managed, the weight started coming off again. I also had another experience where I just couldn't lose weight and it turned out that I was eating too much food. So even though all that food was really, really healthy and I was exercising, I was just ingesting too much food because I hadn't adjusted how much I was eating from when I was like 10 or 15 kilos heavier. So while we don't want to be rushed and panicked and trying to lose weight as quickly as we possibly can, we also don't want to miss any signs that our body is trying to tell us. So if something feels off to you and you want to explore it a little bit more, highly recommend. So they are the 4 biggest mistakes that kept me from my weight loss goals for such a long time. And they kept me trapped in some really unhelpful cycles. And I don't want anyone else to make the same mistakes that I did. So I really hope this video stops at least one person from going down the same path that I did. And before I say goodbye and set you free, I want to give you a little update on how my 2026 transformation is going so far. So for those of you who are new here, I'm implementing my own little system of habit stacking to eventually achieve some massive goals for 2026. And my week by week habit stacking schedule for January looked a little bit like this. I always function better when my nutrition's under control. So I wanted to make sure that that was the first thing I started tackling in 2026. So January's focus was mostly on nutrition and introducing movement back into my lifestyle. And I also added in some meditation at the end of the month. It ended up being a really good schedule for me in January because I was so keen to just get started and start off really strong. But I was also very mindful that this was just the beginning of my year of transformation. And I was also returning to work in early to mid Jan, which is always hard after a holiday. So I tried to balance those two competing priorities. Overall, the month went really well and I feel like I'm off to a really good start actually. And I also feel like I've noticed a little bit of difference in my face. Like some of the bloat has just like depuffed and some of my features feel a little bit sharper maybe. It's like one of those things that only you notice and it's so subtle, but it's enough to kind of keep me motivated and to know that something's working. And I've been posting on Instagram a bit again, so feel free to head over there and follow along, because I post more of the day-to-day stuff, like what I'm eating and how I'm exercising and how I'm kind of managing to do all this as a working parent. Admittedly, I'm still not great with Instagram, so I am really trying. And if you have anything that you would like me to post specifically, let me know, because I want to add value and there's no point in posting stuff that's not helping anyone. So feel free to let me know in comments or DMs or whatever. Yeah, thanks. Anyway, February's plan is as follows. So week 1 is going to be maintaining everything from January. So the focus on nutrition, which basically means focusing on whole foods and very, very limited sugar, alcohol, and processed food. And also maintaining the appropriate serving sizes and 3 liters of water a day. And also maintaining the 4 30-minute walks per week. And also the 10 minutes of meditation each day or evening or morning, whenever I decide to do that. I'm not sure yet. And that's it. I'm not adding anything else in. The first week of February is going to be a maintenance week, what I like to call a maintenance week, where I don't add another habit. I don't stack another one on top. I just hold and maintain whatever I've got so far to kind of get used to it and make it a little bit more sustainable and gradual. Week 2 of February is going to be the same as week 1, but I am going to introduce a new habit, which is to stick to my supplement schedule, which basically just means actually taking the supplements that my doctor has given me. Week 3 is going to be the same as week 2, except that I'm also going to introduce a new habit of dropping one of my snacks. So I'll be down to 3 main meals and 1 snack. And the reason I'm doing that is because my doctor suggested dropping the snacks, both of them, for a few reasons. And one of those reasons was to aid with digestion and help with bloating. And even though I have been eating so well and exercising and drinking water over the last few weeks, I'm still feeling unnecessarily bloated. And week 4 is going to be the same as week 3, except with those 4 walks that I'm doing per week of 30 minutes, I'm going to increase them to 40 minutes each. And that feels like a really good way to get in an extra 40 minutes of activity per week, but I'm not actually having to find time to go out for another walk on another day, because at that point I'm already out and I'm already dressed, I'm already walking. So there we have it. January went well. February is looking good with a solid plan. And we also talked about the 4 biggest mistakes to avoid if you want to lose a lot of weight. Thank you all so much for watching. I mean that so genuinely. I really appreciate your support. And in return, I hope this video was of some assistance to you or added some kind of value. And I will see you all in a few weeks for the next one.